it's a... Nashville, help me welcome to the stage the captain of Crushers GC and the 2024 U.S. Open champion, Bryson DeChambeau!
Gosh, I'm trying to hold it in right now. The support's been overwhelming.
Tickets for Nashville this week are nearly sold out. We are calling this the Bryson effect.
Won the Saudi Open on the Asian Tour in April, and he won the International Series event in Macau in March, beating David Puig in a playoff. Here's a man with 9 career wins, 3 of them on the DP World Tour. 33 years of age from Sacramento, and he is making the most of his chance.
Remember, John Catlin playing as a reserve for Charles Howell III, who's injured. If he were to go on to win this, he gets those points. That would move him right at the top 24 number. Move him at 20th currently.
Yeah, another beautiful shot. These guys making this look so easy.
So having a day. The Englishman 6 under par. He shares the lead with Abraham Ancer for the time being, at least. Now this is Abraham Ancer to stay at 7 under, and in all likelihood have the open night lead, and that is wonderfully done. Abe Ancer with a 64.
This is what Live Golf's about, man. I had a vision of this 2-3 years ago, seeing what the potential could be, and this is just the start. I mean, with how much support we have out here, and it's just the start, that's a testament to what Live Golf is and what the Crushers are doing, what our team's doing, and what we're trying to do for Nashville and places all across the globe. So super excited for the future of Live.
Game time decisions here on SportsGrid, as just mentioned. Kasey Hudson hanging with you for the next hour and a half. But guess what? We've got plenty to round up and unpack, break down all the things between the NBA, the NHL, and, of course, the NFL slate coming up down the pipe. And, of course, we're going to bring in some of our favorite guests to break all of this down between Brady Cannon, Joe Madden, and company. So make sure you stick with us for the next hour and a half and then some, because we've got In-Game Live bringing you even more information. So, of course, I've been hanging out here in studio because we got so much to get to between the NBA season and the NHL season. Let's start with the NBA on this Friday night. A number of games on the slate, but there's a couple more important games to kind of hyper-focus on before we talk to Coach James Young down the stretch here. This might not be important for everyone, but it is going to open up the night's slate for the NBA. We got the Celtics taking on the Hornets, this going down at 7 p.m. Now, Celtics are coming off their first loss of the season, looking for that bounce-back win, which can be very scary going against this Hornets team. They won 4 straight to open out the season. They can continue to navigate through some of their injuries, Porzingis being one of them, Hauser being another one. Hauser has stepped up big off the bench, but day to day to see how he's going to manage through his injuries. This could also be interesting, though, because you've got the Hornets that are going to remain on home court, and we know the home court vibes and how that can play into numbers, odds, and all the good things. But regardless, look, last season, Charlotte was able to take down Boston early in the season. So Boston coming off of L, looking to get back in the W column, whereas Hornets are going to continue to have that home court advantage, and they have bested Boston before early in the season. So we'll see what we're in for when it comes to this tango. I know I got a little glance at where Coach was leaning in this conversation, but regardless, we will see if the Celtics can pull off a win for the night. We do have a bit of a playoff rematch. We've got the Nuggets taking on the Timberwolves later down the slate. This is coming in about 9:30 p.m. Now, Denver Nuggets 2-2, 0-4 against the spread. Open the season with consecutive home losses against Oklahoma City as well as Los Angeles Clippers. Now the Oklahoma City fall 102 points to 87. Not so hot. Then the next one, 109-104. A bit of a narrow loss there. So they're going to be looking to clean things up in a number of ways. Struggling defensively very early on in the season. But again, it's very early. There's so much time to turn things around because 80-plus games is a big, big slate to navigate. The Nuggets are sitting at 19th in the league when it comes to adjusted defense efficiency, But the Timberwolves are one of those teams that are just pretty stout. They did get shaken up for a loss, but they're sitting 2-2, 1-3 against the spread. Lost 110 points to 103 to Los Angeles Lakers on opening night. But after that, they've been able to kind of turn things around. They do have a tendency to give up a number of points when it comes to going against their opponents, so this could reach a high total in the matchup of the night. But again, something we'll gauge as we get closer to that tip-off. Something else that I mentioned going on, these two seasons always run neck and neck. So as excited as we are for NBA season, we're also very excited for the hockey season. Quick recap. We had the Panthers and the Stars in the Global Series go ahead and kick off the day when it comes to the NHL conversation. And the Panthers come out with a big, strong win, 6-4 over the Stars. Now, how did this come into play? Well, a number of things. They've been in Finland for a while. We expected the Finnish Stars to have themselves a day. One did come out shining a bit brighter than the rest of them. Of course, it's going to be Sasha Barkov having a 4-point night in Finland, day over here in the States, putting on a massive show. But this is a guy who we had for a long shot goal, if you guys saw NHL Today earlier here on SportsGrid TV, because of his numbers versus Ottinger. 5 goals in 6 games. He's always finding the back of the net, and he knows how to score when it comes to going neck and neck. With Otter added to the tally today, now you can make it 6 goals in 7 games for Sasha Barkov versus the Stars. Another guy we talked about when it came to this matchup and who was going to make this a messy matchup, messy in a good way for the Florida Panthers, that is, Sam Reinhart. I mean, he's a point leader when it comes to the Panthers, but most importantly, he's doing something and he's making it look too easy. Short-handed goals. He picks up another one today to add to the tally for the Panthers, topping the Stars. One of his 2 goals, by the way, being a short-handed goal in the mix. Walks away with a 3-point night in Finland, 3-point day over here in the States. Evan Rodriguez was also in the mix of the conversation of getting on the board. Another guy whose shooting percentage just looked really good versus Ottinger. Not that Otter has been bad between the pipes this season, but defense isn't playing as strong in front of him. I thought this was going to be a lot more of a low-scoring game between the Panthers and the Stars, but we'll see what adjustments take place for tomorrow's matchup. And then even the rookie gets on the board for the Panthers. You got Mackey picking up, I believe, his 2nd NHL goal of the season and continuing to stay hot and servicing up some plays for the Panthers. So what's coming down the stretch for the NHL slate on this Friday night? Islanders versus the Sabres. Now, we get some news earlier today that for the Islanders, they're not really having the best start to the season. It's just bad news after bad news after bad news. Today's bad news being that Matthew Barzal acquired an upper body injury. This happened versus the Blue Jackets. I guess he tried to shake things off, and then when he was practicing, it was just a no-go. Ends up flying back to Long Island, and we'll find out more once he gets reviewed by the medical team for the Islanders. That's going to be somewhat problematic because even though he has 5 points on the season, he's typically a little bit higher up there in numbers. This is a team that's been struggling to score. They're averaging 2.1 goals per game. They're letting up 2.9 goals per game. Defensively and goaltending-wise, it's really not that bad. Scoring chancing-wise, they're actually pretty high up there, but just finding the back of the net is not it for them thus far this season. So we'll see what takes place between the Islanders and the Sabres as the Islanders continue to step over adversity versus adversity. When it comes to the Sabres, though, they're starting to find their rhythm, especially in the second period. That's kind of where I'm going with some of my best bets of the night. Sabres second period puck line at plus 164. I like the pushes. I like the momentum swings they're getting, and they're going to be basically more offensively high-powered than the Islanders tonight. So while the Islanders can slow things down, take away some of those scoring chances, one way or another, Sabres are going to find the back of the net, and I think that could be more promising in that second period. Paterka being one of the guys to help out for the Sabres. 1+ point is what I have there, but it's Jason Zucker, his experience, his numbers versus Sorokin specifically. 7 goals versus Sorokin, 15.2 shooting percentage, where I think that he can walk away with a long shot goal at plus 310. You got the Jets versus the Blue Jackets. Blue Jackets are not here to mess around this season. They've been looked at as a team that we weren't sure which direction they were going in. They were probably going to need 3 more seasons to find a rhythm. That rhythm is starting to find itself. And what they're also doing very well is not letting up many goals. They're actually sitting as top 10 of goals against and not letting any messy plays get behind them. Regardless, you're going against a Jets team that's just so overwhelming when it comes to their high-powered offense. Kyle Connor, 2+ points on the night, plus 210. I'm a big fan of this play because look what he's done against other teams. Red Wings, 3 points. Leafs, who bolster their blue line, 4 points. Flames, 2 points. He's picking up 2 points like it's not a problem. So Kyle Connor gets some extra juice on that one, plus 210. Cole Sillinger, over his last 5 games, he's been tremendous. Actually, his last 4 games, 5 points in his last 4 games, had a 3-point night versus the Islanders or versus the Oilers. Over half a point sitting at plus money of plus 110 over at DraftKings. Also a big fan of this play. When young guys get in a rhythm, get in a hot streak, have that confidence and that chip on their shoulder, they just tend to carry that over performance by performance, and I think that he can contribute one way or another tonight. And then this is for you, Rangers fans. Lafreniere, 3+ shots on goal, minus 125, but most importantly, it's going to be a Cooley long shot goal for me, plus 450. Only 1 assist in 3 games versus the Senators. Senators are a lot harder to play against this season, but regardless, it's been the third line. It's almost matched the energy of the first line for the Rangers or superseded their success. I like Cooley's game so far. I like Kakko's confidence so far. I think they can continue to be the guys to either get something started or take the momentum swings and spin it in favor for the Rangers. Coming up on the later slate, Lightning versus Wild, Devils versus Flames. And then, like I said, we've got a lot of in-division matchups for the NFL, so you don't want to go anywhere. We're going to talk to Joe Madden, James Young, Brady Kennan, all of the key experts that I love to get their angles, odds, and best bets of the night on. We've got a lot to dive into on this Friday night, so stick with us here on Game Time Decisions on SportsGrid TV. But most importantly, follow SportsGrid over on X. It's at SportsGrid, nice and simple. And then all the talent where you love their odds, bets, and lines, make sure you're giving them a follow as well. Some of the games we'll be looking at for the NFL, talking with Brady about on the other side of this upcoming break. Lions versus Packers. I've seen and heard some interesting takes here. Dolphins versus Bills. Bills sitting atop of their division, but Jets going to try to sneak back in the mix. I don't know. I need some expertise opinion. And then Rams versus the Seahawks. Seahawks making for an interesting case. Rams getting back on the healthier side. So stay with us here on SportsGrid TV and on the other side of this quick break.
Are you okay with him moving to the head of the class of the Heisman with those 2 games? Because he wasn't even in the discussion before those 2 games.
This is a big opportunity for Dylan if he wants to continue to make his case for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he's shown that. I mean, what is he, a 6th-tier player who's going to probably end up setting most of the passing marks because he's been around for so long? So why not also throw a Heisman Trophy in the mix?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Back to Game Time Decisions here on SportsGrid TV. We were just running through the NBA games you should be keeping a close eye on as we get ready to get things going around the 7 o'clock hour. And then, of course, had to recap the global series in the NHL. You had the Panthers come out with the win over the Stars today. Big performance by some of the Finnish Stars in their homeland. And then the late slate of the NHL, but it's the division rivalries that we are going to see this Sunday in the NFL. We're already at that halfway point of the NFL. I was talking with Tom Vecchio the other day, and I'm like, yeah, we're getting close to it. We're approaching it. No, we're here. Like, Super Bowl's almost in sight. Playoffs are very much within reach. So let's figure out how these games are going to continue to shake out and what players you should be keeping a close eye on. When you're looking at the Sunday slate, one of the games that I just cannot keep an eye away from is going to be the Lions taking on the Packers. Some news with Jordan Love, obviously, being the fact that he got shaken up yet again with another injury. We've seen him do everything possible to bounce back when he needs to. Regardless of what happens, though, we've seen Malik be able to step into that role. We've seen them curtail the game around him so that the Packers can still find success if Love is not in the pocket. So it's not a huge worry, but it will change the numbers around a little bit if he is good to go. Spread sitting at 2.5 currently, total sitting at 47.5. Just a few days ago, you were looking at a 48.5 total. I probably expect to see this fluctuate a few more times when we get closer to a reach of whether or not Jordan Love is going to be good to go or stay in, or if they're not micromanaging his repetitions or how often he's going to be throwing the ball. Then I think we'll be seeing a different total, probably changing around a bit as we get closer to Sunday. With all of that in mind, with the up-in-the-air situation when it comes to the quarterback or the health or the longevity of Jordan Love in a game, if he participates in a game, then we're probably looking to Jacobs on the ground, helping get things moving. But starting with the Lions side of the ball, we know exactly what the 1-2 punch for the Lions is going to be. The 1-2 punch is called Gibbs and Montgomery, completely coming in on the attack. We've seen them find so much success. Now, their numbers versus the Packers, quite interesting in a way, maybe because of the utilization and the carries between the two. But for the most part, you're looking at Gibbs at 63.5 when it comes to his over-under yardage on the ground. Then you're looking at Montgomery, 55.5 when it comes to his over-under total on the ground. Passing-wise, we've seen Jared Goff have himself a number of big games, but his passing yardage is sitting at 220.5. The first time Tom Vecchio and I discussed this game, Tom made a good point as to how Jared Goff doesn't particularly have to have himself a big passing day. Clearly, with the 1-2 punch being Gibbs and Montgomery, they can have that balanced attack, but more so trusting his arm in this situation is just one of the things where they can alleviate that pressure from him and not have to worry about it too much. Receiving-wise, you always hear Tom mention St. Brown being the hero of the day and the game. His yardage is sitting at 67.5, but it's Laporta at 45.5 that I actually find really interesting versus this Packers team. Over the last 3 weeks, we've seen tight ends carry a larger role, more so in the middle of the field. That's their role, but we've seen them come to life. We've seen the yardage pass props, except for me and Tyler Conklin last night, but that's a whole nother discussion we'll never get back into. But Laporta, we know what he means to this Lions offense, and we know that he has the capability of hitting this 45.5 yards, but depending on the numbers, we also know what he means to them in the red zone when it comes to the target share and how often they're looking for him to pick up a tutty or two. It's Laporta to get some good numbers. So right now I'm not seeing anything outrageous in terms of where he can pull in an anytime touchdown. It's sitting at plus 210. And the one thing that the guys have told me on Pro Football Today is that if it's at a minus, stay away from it. So you're seeing some juice on this one for Laporta to find the end zone versus the Packers. I like the matchup of the tight end getting some extra work done as the Packers shake things through. I'm not seeing too much in terms of props on the Packers side. That probably speaks to the fact that a number of their receivers kind of get banged up, and we still have to figure out, is it a go for Jordan Love? Another game coming in hot when it comes to the matchups is going to be the Dolphins versus the Bills. Now, Dolphins versus the Bills, I don't want to count this out as being a non-interesting game. We know the Dolphins are trying to get back to what we were expecting them to look like week 2, week 3, week 4. The injuries that were accumulated versus the first matchup versus the Bills says a lot as to why we haven't seen what this Dolphins team can do and how they can produce. Coming back in, though, Tua did help start bringing or elevating his offense back to life. We did see Tyreek Hill finally have a bigger game in some time because the previous quarterbacks just did not know how to wield the weapons that they had ahead of them. This is going to be helpful, but what does that mean for the workload? HN did well on the ground previously versus the Cardinals, so they may have not gotten the win, but they only missed the margin by 1 point, falling short to the Cardinals 28-27. Tua makes his return with 234 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and no turnovers, which is extremely helpful. HN on the ground, as I mentioned, 97 rushing yards, but Hill through the air, 72 receiving yards. They were able to open the first quarter with a touchdown as well as a field goal. So grabbing 10 points versus a Cardinals team that's really not that bad to go up against showed us a lot on the rare form that the Dolphins are going to look to get back into. But that's the beauty of in-division battles and rivalries. This is a Bills team that's just continued to stack performance by performance since we saw them beat the Dolphins a couple weeks ago. So with that in mind, It's going to be a long, tall task for the Dolphins to pull off a win in this one. Spread sitting at 5.5 between these two teams. But most importantly, it's the total we got to look at, 49.5. What is this telling us? Well, we know that the Dolphins defense can be a little shaky here and there, but the Bills have been pretty stout as of late. So we had this whole dissertation on Pro Football today about the total, the first matchup these two teams had, and all of the bets kind of just went out the window. That game was very messy. We know that the game can get messy between these two teams. The 49.5 total, I'm really just not digging. For once, you might actually hear me say that I'll be gauging the under on this one because the Dolphins are going to go out without a fight. They're going to try to get as many points on the board, but they have to slow down a Bills team that now we haven't seen any props for Amari Cooper. Tom and I were looking for it recently. Still nothing posted quite yet. So when you're looking on the Bills side of things, you're seeing Khalil Shakir, you're seeing Cook, you're seeing Kincaid, but we are still not seeing anything for Cooper. Hill's numbers sitting at 79.5. This feels a bit spot on, seeing as what he did when Tua did get back into the mix the other week. Jalen Waddle, I'm just kind of up in the air about this. Tom mentioned the drops that we saw, taking a minute to get back into the cadence with Tua. But outside of that, I think that this can be another game that the Bills find a clean performance in, but a good challenge to see where the Dolphins can potentially pick up where they should have left off before all things shaken up with Tua. So when we get back on the other side of this break, we've got more of the division battles to break down, to get into. Hopefully we'll get the opinion and the play card of Brady Kennan. So make sure you don't go anywhere. Make sure you're also following SportsGrid over on SportsGrid. But most importantly, stick with us here on Game Time Decisions on the other side of this quick break.
Are you okay with him moving to the head of the class at the Heisman with those two games? Because he wasn't even in the discussion before those two games.
This is a big opportunity for Dylan if he wants to continue to make his case for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he's shown that. You know, I mean, what is he, a sixth-tier player who's going to probably end up setting most of the passing marks because he's been around for so long? So why not also throw a Heisman Trophy in the mix?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
You are watching Game Time Decisions here on SportsGrid TV. I hope everyone's having a fantastic Friday as we run through the NBA, NHL, and NFL slate. But like I mentioned, Brady Kennan coming in to help us break down all things going on this Sunday. Now, I started to talk about it, Brady, without you, but we've got to figure out how to eyeball this Miami Dolphins versus Buffalo Bills game. The spread 5.5. Okay, that was kind of interesting. The total, 49.5. I didn't know what to make of that, as the Dolphins still have to find a rhythm on both sides of the ball, and the Bills are kind of in a bit of a sweet spot here. So what do you see for this matchup?
49.5 feels a little high. I think this game could be one-sided. I'm a big Bills fan right now. I have really liked what I've seen out of this team the last few weeks. That was not an easy spot to go out to Seattle. The Bills, I believe it's 4 out of their last 5 games have been on the road, and they handled that with no problem at all. They crushed the Seattle Seahawks in a tough spot to play, out of division, out of conference, and it was no problem at all. They just ran roughshod right over that Seattle Seahawks team, who you thought might, show up, and that was a good spot for them, but it was not in the least. And then you have the Dolphins with Tua Tagovailoa coming back into that lineup, and it didn't seem to matter much. Yeah, they put up, 27, 26 points on the board or something like that, but, Arizona put up more. And if there's any strength on that Dolphins team, the defense has been performing better than the offense has. We know, obviously, the offense gets a shot in the arm with Tua back there at quarterback, but the defense couldn't stop Kyler Murray and company last week either. I have felt for a long time that the Dolphins have been a bad team. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing. They're just not very good, whether Tua's in there or not. I don't think this team is very good. I think the Bills are absolutely going the other direction. This is really a game to pretty much put a clamp on the AFC East division title at the halfway point in the season. The Bills have dominated the Dolphins as of late. They're at home, where Miami, a warm weather team, typically does not play well. When I crunch all my numbers, Kasey, and again, these numbers are heavily influenced by Tua not being in the lineup because he hasn't been there really for the major part of the season. When I crunch all the stats, I come out with the Bills as a 10-point favorite. Not just 5.5, not just 6. We're seeing some 6.5s in the market, but all the way to 10. And I do believe that the Buffalo Bills handle business here today. And you can make a case that number should be adjusted because now Tua's back. But like I say, it didn't matter last week. I don't think it'll matter again this week. I think the Bills run them out of the building.
Yeah, and then with all the hype coming into the season, everybody thought that the Dolphins weren't getting enough credit to what their roster was shaping up to be and how they should be able to orchestrate said roster. But it didn't matter when these two teams faced off with each other in the beginning of the year. Yes, a lot of injuries were accumulated, but regardless, it just wasn't a good look for the Dolphins team. Now, that brings me to a question that I have to ask you, Brady. Some people are trying to say that this might be an exposure to maybe not the best coaching for this Miami Dolphins roster. Would you kind of agree with that?
I don't know. I mean, it feels like people that are fans of the Dolphins are ready to throw Mike McCarthy out and, the project is not going well. And, the proof is right there. It doesn't look too good. But, this team obviously made the playoffs last year. He seems like that genius boy wonder. But then at the same time, and his hands have been a little tied without his quarterback for most of this season, too. I don't think the guy is a failure yet. I think he is a very intelligent, great play caller. We've seen what he did with San Francisco. He's got a great history. He's got a great resume. I think you have to give him a little bit more time. Vic Fangio, they tried that last year. It didn't really work out. I think this team just has a lot of different pieces to fill, but I don't necessarily think we need to go firing coaches just yet. If it lasts for another season or two and doesn't improve, then maybe you have to start looking that direction. But I think this team just does not have a ton of talent. I don't think they're a very good team. They've been beaten up by injury, free agency, you name it. They haven't caught a lot of breaks, and I don't think this team is very good at all, whether you have Tua or not. And I don't think it's necessarily the fault of the coach.
Yeah, well, good. At least we're not both going straight for the coach cut there. Less than a minute here, but what's one of your favorite plays on the upcoming Sunday?
Well, if we've got time to stick around, I'll certainly stick around and be happy to discuss further with you. But I like the Washington Commanders as a road favorite at the Giants. And I think there's a lot of reasons to back this team. It's a totally different Commanders team that Daniel Jones has typically had success against Washington. But this is a whole new regime, a whole new team. I think they take care of business on the road. I love Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury against this division. I lay the points here and think Washington gets another win.
And we love what Washington's been doing so far. Stick around with us here on Game Time Decisions on the other side of this quick break.
Are you okay with him moving to the head of the class at the Heisman with those two games? Because he wasn't even in the discussion before those two games.
This is a big opportunity for Dylan if he wants to continue to make his case for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he's shown that. I mean, what is he, a six-tier player who's going to probably end up setting most of the passing marks because he's been around for so long? So why not also throw a Heisman Trophy in the mix?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
You are watching Game Time Decisions here on SportsGrid TV, and if you just joined us, then thank you so much. We got a long slate of NBA, NFL, and NHL, but if you have been with us, then you know that Brady Cannon and I were just discussing some of his favorite plays looking ahead to this Sunday slate, but more importantly, what could potentially go down between the Giants and the Commanders, and we know that there's a lot of excitement, a lot of hope supporting the Commanders right now in all things that have been their success thus far this season. So, Brady, continue to kind of run us through your thoughts for this matchup.
Yeah, I know you've got Coach coming up, and he's got to play on the Knicks game, which is about ready to tip off here a little bit. But I wanted to get this nugget in for folks that are taking a look at the New York Giants and the Washington Commanders game this weekend. There's a few little nuggets here that I think are very interesting, and one of my biggest reasons why I like the Commanders this week. If you talk about head coach Dan Quinn, in 2013 and 2014, he was an assistant defensive coach with the Seattle Seahawks. After that, he got hired by the Atlanta Falcons to be their head coach. When he was the head coach of the Falcons, what did he do against his former division, the NFC West? 5-1 against the spread. He really did well against familiar opponents that he studied, like a blanket in the NFC West. He did incredibly well against them when he was head coach of the Falcons. Okay, then he gets hired by the Dallas Cowboys as their defensive coordinator. What did he do against his former division, the NFC South, where he was coaching the Falcons against those familiar opponents? The Cowboys 4-0 against the spread against the NFC South when Dan Quinn was their defensive coordinator. He has shown to be really good against teams that he is familiar with, former division opponents. Well, who's he coaching now? He's coaching in the NFC East, where, of course, he was the Cowboys defensive coordinator, a part of the NFC East. So this guy has, a real ability to have dominance over teams that he is familiar with. Now you add the dynamic duo, Cliff Kingsbury, his offensive coordinator. What did Kingsbury do when he was the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals against the NFC East? 7-0 against the spread. These two guys own the NFC East. They know how to beat Daniel Jones better than anybody on the planet. I think they get it done again on Sunday.
I love that. I absolutely love that. You can't really work against that, for one, and for two, the Commanders' success has spoke for itself. Regardless, the teams that they have fallen short to, it hasn't been by any sort of landslide. They've been in compete with the top teams in the league so far, and then you even got Jaden Daniels working through injuries and still showing up as a leader for his team. So, Brady, I'm so glad you stuck around to share that information with us. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to get more of your best bets before Sunday gets going. But we got to switch over to the NBA because we do have the Knicks taking on the Pistons. We've got James Young to give us his betting card of the night and some angles and odds to check out as we get ready to foresee what is going to happen at tip-off. Now, what to expect, 6.5 spread, 218.5 on the total here. And then it's going to be Coach who's going to give us the best odds and lines. But first and foremost, Coach, how's your Friday going? And are you supporting the Knicks? Are you a Knicks fan? All right.
There we go. Nope.
There we go.
Listen, I was talking to myself because I'm a Knicks fan. So pain and torture I am. You should know this. Jets, Mets, Knicks. I'm 48, one championship in my entire life, and it was when I was 10. But I digress. But I'm not on the Knicks side. I worry about the spread. Kasey, I'm going to go with Karl Anthony Towns over 20.5 points. The two games that Cat did not score over 20.5 points were the two games he had single-digit shots. They made a conscious effort. He got 44 and Bam a couple nights ago. Bam is one of the top 10 defenders in the NBA. Jalen Duren doesn't play a lot of defense. Give me Cat over 20.5 points. And other game tipping up really quick. Boston got blown out at Indiana. Well, they came back and he lost in overtime. They're going to be in a bad mood. Celtics minus the points. That game tips off now as well.
All right. I'm glad you brought up the Boston Celtics because a lot of people were like, how are they going to blow off the steam of that loss? And a number of things and reasons and odds and lines say, hey, they got this entirely under control. So we have no fear over the home court advantage or the fact that Charlotte bested Boston early in the season last year.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about that. Simply put, this team's got a lot of pride. Okay, and Joe Mazzulla don't like losing any games. I mean, think about the fact that they were getting blown out of Indiana, and they made a run. They could have folded. That shows the competitive nature. I don't want to be Charlotte tonight. That's why I like the Celtics minus the points, even though it's a double-digit road favorite.
That's a great way to put that. Nobody wants to be Charlotte tonight when you've got a Celtics team that wants to get back in the scoring column. Anything for the Nuggets versus Timberwolves, because I'm pretty sure this is a playoff rematch. 4 on the spread, 219.5 when it comes to the total. And look, you got a Denver Nuggets team that hasn't been too hot defensively for the most part, but you can maybe say the same in certain instances when it comes to the Timberwolves. So what do you like or don't like about this one?
I'm looking squarely at Julius Randle. Julius Randle, earlier in the day, was 6.5. Right now, it's at 7.5 rebounds. I like him to go over here. It's kind of weird looking at him, but if you look at the fact that he's gone over 3 of the last 5 games, it's been up and down, hit, miss for him and that lineup in Minnesota. But here's the thing. Rudy has got to take care of Joker. So someone's got to fly in and get the rebounds. This is a low number for a guy that traditionally rebounds the ball really well. I know Michael Porter Jr. is who he's got to guard. Michael Porter Jr. has not gone off to a great start. I love over 7.5 rebounds tonight for Julius Randle.
All right, I like that. Now, I jumped ahead from some of the other games getting ready to get going here, but just got to get your perspective in case there's any live bettors looking for angles. We got the Magic taking on the Cavs. 7.5 on the spread, 216 when it comes to the total. Magic not too bad last year, making a pretty decent run, but what do you potentially see with this one?
I'll tell you right now, Paolo Banchero's out. They may have went from the Orlando Magic to the Orlando Tragic. And they're playing a team right now in the Cleveland Cavs that I think, and I said this before on my Betting Above the Rim podcast, that I thought that they were going to win the Central Division. I think getting Kenny Atkinson makes this team better. It's an upgrade over J.B. Bickerstaff, but also the fact of his ability to develop younger talent. That's why I want to see him again with Jared Allen, who he had with the Nets. Have him again with Karis LeVert, who he had with the Nets. Have him now with Garland. But that main guy I'm looking at is his evolution of Evan Mobley. I like the Cavs tonight minus the points. listen, if it's anything, you may want to look at under in this game because if you're Jamal Mosley, who's one of the better defensive coaches in the league, you're going to keep this game low. Same thing with Cleveland. Kenny Atkinson, as good as he is offensively, they've been good defensively. Maybe look at under 217.5. It's a low number, but if you like where to go with a side, take the Cleveland Cavs minus the 7.5 tonight.
All right. Well, we've got less than 2 minutes, but we'll continue on the other side of the break coming up here. But you got the Kings versus the Hawks in the later hour of 7:40. 6 on the spread, 236 on the total. That's a high total now.
It's a high total. So here's what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to take DeMar DeRozan over 25.5 points plus rebounds. He averages 27, right? Listen, he could get this by himself. Here's why, folks. You got to look at the matchups and line up. Who is the best defender for the Hawks on the wing? That's DeAndre Hunter. He is hurt. He's always hurt. So right now, I'm going to take 25. Some places may have it at 24.5 points plus rebounds for DeMar DeRozan. Kasey, I wouldn't be shocked if he got 25 scoring by himself.
Ooh, those are big. That's a tall task, Coach, to put on somebody, but I wouldn't go against you to say that somebody can get the job done by himself. Now, we do have other games to get into. We do have later slates. We got Bulls, Nets, Lakers, Raptors, Pacers, Pelicans, and Thunder versus the Trailblazers, which means Coach is going to continue to hang out with us, give us his expertise and lines, odds, and best player props to gauge as we get through the rest of this Friday night. So stick with us here on SportsGrid TV. Make sure you're following Coach over on X as well as SportsGrid at SportsGrid. Nice and simple for you to remember to stay in touch with all hosts as well as your favorite shows here on SportsGrid. So don't go anywhere. Stick with us here on Game Time Decisions as we rally one quick break and then we jump right back into the NBA conversation with Coach James Young here on SportsGrid.
Are you okay with him moving to the head of the class at a Heisman with those two games? Because he wasn't even in the discussion before those two games.
This is a big opportunity for Dylan if he wants to continue to make his case for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he's shown that. I mean, what is he, a sixth-tier player who's going to probably end up setting most of the passing marks because he's been around for so long? So why not also throw a Heisman Trophy in the mix?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Back at it with Game Time Decisions here on SportsGrid TV. Hanging out with James Young, or Coach, as we love to call him here. But you guys know, all right, I would hope that you all know that Coach and I had a chance to chat quite a bit every Friday because we just wrapped up WNBA today, which was replaced by NHL today. But there's news in the WNBA that we have to get to, because when we did the season reflection and highlights and so on and so forth, Coach was mentioning that he had a hunch of something coming down the pipeline coaching-wise. It was potentially going to change around. Well, if you've missed it, the Indiana Fever catch themselves a new coach in Stephanie White. And I think Coach has a hot take on this one. So what did you make of the coach change that you called a couple weeks ago?
You know, Kasey, I don't like how it happened. I'm gonna be upfront and honest. As a coach, the last thing I want is that I'm still employed, someone was angling possibly for a job. Stephanie White was rumored to be having come down to 3 teams: the Sun, obviously the Chicago Sky, and Indiana Fever. The problem is she was a coach of the Sun. The Sky had already let go of Teaspoon, but Christy Sides was still the head coach. So I got my wheels turning here, and it makes sense why Stephanie White would go from Connecticut to Indiana. Number 1, Caitlin Clark. I mean, that could be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 could be the reason why that she wants the coach Caitlin Clark. But number 2, she's one of the best coaches in the WNBA. Number 3, remember, folks, before she coached at Vanderbilt as the head coach, where was she? Oh, that's right. She was the head coach of the Indiana Fever. You want more? I got more. Where did she go to college? Purdue. Where is that? Oh, that's right. That would be Indiana. That's another reason. And here's the last thing that people don't know. The Connecticut Sun, 2 things with Connecticut. Number 1, Kasey, they have arguably the worst, or one of the worst practice facilities in the league. There's rumors that they get thrown out of a practice facility, which they don't even have a facility, for birthday parties. That's a problem. Lastly, Alyssa Thomas, free agent. DeWanna Bonner, free agent. Brianna Jones, free agent. Carrington, restricted free agent. And then they traded their first-round pick to Chicago for Marina Mabrey. It makes sense now, if you line all those things up, why Stephanie White is in Indiana. And I'll say this right now, depending on if Casey Plum comes back, remember, she's an unrestricted free agent for the Las Vegas Aces. If she does not go back to Vegas, ready, folks? Indiana Fever, on my preseason poll, if they re-sign Kelsey Mitchell, will be the number 3 team going into the WNBA season behind New York and Minnesota.
Wow. Okay, I can't wait for us to throw this on the board and see how everything transpires, because it makes sense. And the hard part about it is that heading into the postseason for WNBA, the Sun was pegged as a team that could potentially be a surprise upset team in the mix. I mean, a lot of odds, a lot of sports books were drawing in favorability when it comes to the Suns. Most of that residing on some of their defensive efforts on the second half of the season. But regardless, we'll see how this roster ends up shaping as we get closer to the WNBA season coming back. But big news for the Fever, and I'm sure Caitlin Clark is very excited to work with Stephanie White, and very, very sure that White is excited to see how she can take the Fever to the next level, because they did a lot coming on the outside of the Olympic break on their own and moving forward. So I love that take, Coach, and we will see what shakes up. Taking it back to the NBA, we were talking about the Kings versus the Hawks. We were talking about the high total. You gave us your odds, your love for the props in that one. Another one coming down the stretch of the late slate of 7 o'clock hour being 7:40, Lakers versus the Raptors, 9.5 on the spread. Lakers favored here, no joke. And then 232.5 when it comes to the total. What do we see in this one, Coach?
It's a very high spread here, especially as a road favorite. But when you really look at it, like the Lakers, they should want to bounce back after the last performance. I do like this Laker team on the road. I've come around, honestly, on JJ Redick pretty quickly. Losing by 24 at Cleveland, giving up 134 points. I think you see this team dial it back in versus a Toronto team that's, let's be honest, is not very good. They just lost, obviously, at Charlotte. They had that close loss to Denver, but Denver's tremendously underachieved. I'm going to take a chance here. Give me the Lakers minus points, but maybe the better play to do it, maybe just do it in the first half. Lakers jump out. You don't have to worry about the backdoor cover.
You know I love a first half or a first quarter bet, Coach. You know how much I love those. Bulls versus the Net. Spread just sitting at a measly 1 here, but then you also have a total sitting at 228.5. 7:40 tip-off. What do we see for this one? Under 2 minutes to go.
You know what's crazy about this game is, like, Chicago and Brooklyn have both, in my opinion, underachieved. I thought they both were going to suck, especially the Nets have 2 wins. I don't think they're going to have 2 wins by Thanksgiving. I'm stunned by this. So you know what? I'm showing my bias, me being born in East Flatbush. Give me the Brooklyn Nets on the money line. And if you want to look at a player prop, Dennis Schroeder, not Ricky Schroeder. You're a little too young to know about Ricky Schroeder. That's Silver Spoon. But anyway, Dennis Schroeder over his points prop tonight.
Okay. I was going to ask because, you know, me being new to the area, I always challenge the guys in production, and I'm like, so where is the line between being a diehard New York fan of, you know, the Mets over the Yankees or the Giants over the Jets, vice versa? When it starts getting closer into certain games or matchups or territories, do you just jump to New York over everybody? Because we kind of do that in Florida. Like, we kind of do that. Hockey's a little bit different because we want to be the guys that get it all done.
No, absolutely not, Kasey. But really quick, one last one to tell people. You heard some things. I'll tell you one last thing. Double Tyrese Halliburton, plus 115 on FanDuel. Hit it the last 2 games. He's got his stride. DeJounte Murray, best defender out for New Orleans. Give me Halliburton, double, plus money.
Add a double to the play and stick with us here on SportsGrid on the other side of this break.
Enter into the magical world of McLuck.com, where even the smallest of spins can win real cash prizes. Adventure into over 1,000 of the best Vegas-style slot games. So what are you waiting for? Unlock your free welcome offer today. Join the fun where winners play and players win.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think GameTime Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to GameTime Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than GameTime Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into GameTime Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
You are watching Game Time Decisions here on SportsGrid TV. We got to chat with Brady Kennan. We got to chat with James Young. Now it's time to catch you up on all the games going on already on this Friday slate before we get to talk with Joe Madden. More football and more NHL. So what do we got going on so far? Well, we had a couple of 7 o'clock tip-offs to take place. One of those ones being the Celtics versus the Hornets. Celtics on top by 2, 18-16 over the Hornets. 6:16 left in the first quarter at the moment. Then Coach said it. And it hurts me to say that he said it, but yeah, he said that the Magic's season potentially took a turn for the worse because of certain guys that are not going to be able to play and add. And then he mentioned all the reasons why you should find some value in the Cavs matchup tonight. Cavs on top by 8 points, and there's 6:34 left in the first quarter here. So, of course, plenty of time because everything just got started, but still not the hottest start for the Orlando Magic, down 18-10 versus the Cavs. Then moving on to the Knicks versus the Pistons. This one is even more of a beating. 5:17 left in the first quarter, but the Knicks are up 23-8 over the Pistons. Coming up here shortly, we got the tip-off for the Bulls and the Nets, and then after that, Lakers, Raptors, Kings, and Hawks before we touch over to that 7:40 time frame. So plenty to keep up to date with when it comes to the scores going on around the league with the tip-offs that have already taken place. Then just kind of getting a gander here at any of the other scores that are coming in hot from the NBA conversation over to the NHL conversation. You guys kind of heard where I was leaning on certain plays when we opened up that first segment here on Game Time Decisions. We've got the Islanders and Sabres game underway, 13:30 left in the first period, and it is deadlocked 0-0. Now, this is kind of expected because, as I mentioned, it's not that the Islanders are giving a bunch of plays up. It's not like they're giving up a bunch of shots on goal. It's just the fact that they cannot freaking score. So that first period is always pretty stale. Things picking up towards the end. I've got the Sabres grabbing at least a goal in the second period at plus money. We'll see what shakes out coming down the stretch here. Now, another game going on in the NHL. You got the Jets versus the Blue Jackets. 10:50 left in the first period as things keep moving along, and there's really no element of surprise here. I've been on top of Kyle Connor when it comes to all things Jets because of his success and point consistency, but Ehlers has probably been one of the other guys on the Jets roster that I have talked about immensely. I think he's going to top his numbers from last season, regardless of how many wins or losses the Winnipeg Jets pick up this season. He's just been so good, and he carries the lone goal in this game at the moment. You got Miller with an apple, and you got Miller with an apple for Ehlers' goal to take the lead versus the Blue Jackets 1-0 as the first period begins to wind down. And then during the break, I already saw all the praise for Igor Shesterkin. That's totally fine. You got the Rangers up 1-0 versus the Senators, 9:48 left in the first period. And the anticipation was that the Rangers were going to be able to take this one. Lafreniere, no shots on goal, but picked up the apple on the Panarin goal that took place so far. So you've got a number of things working well for the Rangers going against the Senators team that can be pretty problematic. They don't have as many turnovers as they did last season. We've seen them stun or bring some pretty big matchups to the ice versus a number of teams, but I don't think the Rangers liked losing to the Capitals the other night. I think there was some course correction with some things, and of course, Panarin's line, there's just a high expectation there and a massive weight on the shoulders for the Rangers. So one of the other favorite plays that I had in the mix here was Lafreniere, 3+ shots on goal, has the most shot attempts of anyone on that Rangers roster. I like his vision when he gets into a groove for the game, so we'll see if anything else shakes out. Now, if you missed the top of the segment, Panthers 6-4 victory over the Dallas Stars, and there's a number of odds and favorites that will probably be shaking up over the next week when it comes to the Stanley Cup playoff odds. The top 3 teams originally heading into this NHL season are not the teams performing all that well. You still see the Oilers kind of sitting at the top there wearing the crown. Connor McDavid going to be out for a couple of weeks, but regardless, we'll see if the Panthers supersede a number of these teams and the Dallas Stars continue to clip at the heels. Barkov has a huge performance in the homeland of Finland, 4 points to help the Panthers pull off the victory. Other games that we've got coming down the pipeline here is to figure out some of the top games and props for the Sunday slate. But before we get ready to turn things over to the break and then welcome back in with Joe Madden, we do have 2 goals for the Blue Jackets in a matter of just seconds, at least from what I'm seeing here. Let's see if it loads up for me. For the Blue Jackets, we're seeing 2-1 over the Jets. It's not showing me who scored the goals yet, but we've said that the Blue Jackets are a team that you should not underestimate whatsoever. They're actually a top 10 team when it comes for goals against, and they're starting to get a big rhythm going in their top 6 players. So More hockey on the other side, more football, more importantly, on the other side. And then we've got some big college football matchups. So make sure you stay with us here on Game Time Decisions on SportsGrid TV. Make sure you're following SportsGrid over at SportsGrid. Make sure you're following Joe Madden, because that's who we're talking to on the other side of this break to get all of her spectacular picks and so much more. So stick with us here on Game Time Decisions on the other side of this quick break.
Are you okay with him moving to the head of the class of the Heisman with those two games? Because he wasn't even in the discussion before those two games.
This is a big opportunity for Dylan if he wants to continue to make his case for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he's shown that. I mean, what is he, a sixth-tier player who's going to probably end up setting most of the passing marks because he's been around for so long? So why not also throw a Heisman Trophy in the mix?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into Game Time Decisions here on SportsGrid TV. As promised, I started running down what was going on in the NHL, but it's time to talk with Joe Madden, get some other NHL picks, dive into some college football, and so much more. But first and foremost, Joe, how are you? How have you been? How's your Friday going before we get into the hockey?
It's going great. We had a fantastic game out in Finland today with the Florida Panthers coming up nice and strong. It was so close to hitting some of my point parlays that I was able to put up, but Kasey, I don't know about you. What happened to Roope Hintz out there? I expected the Finland native to be able to get on the board today, at least point-wise. I included him in a bunch of things, and he was just silenced out there on the ice.
Oh, my gosh. I was shocked about it, too. Tom Vecchio was asking me last night, this has to be a lock-in for a goal, right? And I'm like, yeah, the numbers look good. His statistics, his consistency. He's somebody who's been able to find the net behind Bobrovsky. 3 shots on goal, but nothing else. I was really surprised at how the Panthers kind of bested the Stars today. But at least Barkov, Sasha had himself a celebratory day with 4 points versus the Stars. Right before we welcomed you in, though, the games were kind of neck and neck. It was 0-0 for the Islanders and the Sabres. Now it's 1-1. Horvat finally helps the Islanders get on the board here. And then for the Sabres side, it's Cousins, who actually plays quite well versus the Islanders. Then things tie up for the Jets versus the Blue Jackets. 1-1 yet again. Ehlers, who I love right now. And then you've got Sean Corelli. Outside of that, Rangers continue to hold their lead. But what do you like in tonight's NHL slate with some of the other games coming up around the 8 and 9 o'clock hour?
Well, first, looking at some of the games in action and live betting opportunities, Kasey, I do think the Islanders and the Sabres, I thought this would be a lower scoring game. I'm actually shocked we've got 2 goals in the first period already in this one. So I'm looking at a live number of under 6.5 coming in at plus 122, looking fantastic out there because that number going into the game was a 5.5. I am writing the Columbus Blue Jackets straight up on the money line to pull off the upset win versus the Winnipeg Jets. I just think you look at Winnipeg, they're rolling so phenomenally hot, took that loss to Toronto, came back out, answered back versus the Red Wings. And I think with what we've seen out of the Columbus Blue Jackets on all ends of the ice, this is an opportunity for them to get a win over a hot team of the Winnipeg Jets. So at plus 126 with them tied up right now, I think it's a solid way to look. And I'm holding my breath for the next 5 minutes between the Rangers and the Ottawa Senators. I wrote the first period under 1.5 goals, but expecting it to open up after that. So with the Rangers scoring early in that one, I'm definitely sweating it. But when we move on to the Tampa Bay Lightning versus the Minnesota Wild, this is a great matchup between these two teams. We did just see the Wild be able to get the win in this one a couple of days back. And I do think this is another opportunity for them to continue to win here over the Tampa Bay Lightning. And it's not saying anything against the Lightning, but I do look at this team in the Wild and look at Kaprizov and what this team is able to do on all ends of the ice. With Gustafsson in tonight, I do think a home ice advantage is in play and they can get the win in a tight battle. But this is a tight battle that I think is a 4-3 higher scoring game that goes to overtime. That overtime bet, Kasey, coming in at plus 360. Kaprizov, 5 goals and 13 assists already on the season. And I know the playmakers here of the Tampa Bay Lightning are so phenomenally strong for all aspects on the ice. But I think the Wild can pull it off again.
Yeah, I can't go against you on that one because the Wild have been pretty stout, especially when it comes to goals against. They're sitting top 5 in the league for how many goals they let slip past them, and then Kaprizov has just been spectacular. He's averaging more than a point per game when he faces the Tampa Bay Lightning specifically, so that's where I had to give some credit where credit was due, Joe. So I really like those bets, especially the live lines that you have everyone gauging. I was with you. I didn't think that the Islanders and the Sabres were going to be picking up a goal apiece in the first period. I got the Sabres to get more action in the second period there, but Islanders have a lot of weight on their shoulder for how this season just continues to unravel itself. Moving on from hockey for a minute, but we'll keep you up to date on all the scores. And so far, you can breathe a little lighter. 4 minutes and 30 seconds left in the first period, and hopefully things shake out accordingly for you, Joe. But let's talk a little college football because we do have some big matchups coming up here. And when it comes to college football, Ohio State versus Penn State has been talked about for weeks now, circled on the calendar. What are some things and ways that fans should be gauging this game getting ready to go on tomorrow?
You know, it comes down to which coach can win that big game. Is Ryan Day going to be able to come in and get it done here in Penn State for Ohio State? And I just don't think they can get it done. You look at Penn State and you look at their defensive strengths, and under James Franklin, I think Penn State plus the points is the way you have to go. I trust in their quarterback a lot more. Drew Aller coming out here. Now, he did leave the last game, but even his backup, I think, does have that strength. Will Howard is throwing those interceptions left, right, and center, Kasey. And Ohio State, while I love the Buckeyes and everything they bring to the table, I could see Penn State not only covering with the points, but pulling off the upset win here. I know Ohio State is so strong, but that offensive line has so many issues that I just don't see them getting this one done.
Yeah, and the good point with Penn State and some of the coaching adjustments is that as strong as the offense can be, their defense is just so fun to watch. They're bruising. I mean, there's a number of second halves where Penn State's defense has just come out and been a completely different team, flipping the script. Now, we do have a couple other early games in the mix here. Let's talk a little Boise State versus San Diego State. Anything that you like calling out to you on this one?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a fun game tonight out there. Boise State, a huge favorite, laying 24.5 points, as you can see, a low total of 56.5. I think if you're riding with San Diego State to put any points on the board, you have to look at the running back Cooper there to be able to do so. He has been able to put up 8 touchdowns thus far this season. And when we turn to Boise State, this is all about this team for me tonight. I think they run up this score and they run up the score fast. I'm taking their team total over 40.5, and I'm going to take their running back Gene T to come out and be able to get 3+ touchdowns on the board and over 191 rushing yards. I know this number is high, but he's in line for the Heisman. And I do think against a soft run defense here of San Diego State that we're going to see him run all over them. So really high on Boise State, really high on G&T to come out nice and strong in this one, Kasey.
I know. I always have this bias with San Diego State, but once upon a time I wanted to play soccer there. So in my brain, they're not bad at anything, even though it's not particularly always the case. But I like those angles. We do have another one. Florida. Just so much Florida action going on. But for this one, before I butcher it, South Florida versus FAU. Florida Atlantic. What are some things that we like in this shakeup?
Yeah, so we look here at Florida Atlantic and they have struggled against the run, but I look at South Florida here and I don't think that this is going to be a team that they're going to have those issues with. I think Florida Atlantic here at home with the value you're getting on them on the money line is the way to go. This team sitting 2-5, but 0-3 in conference play. They really need to step up and get things done in this one today. They are so solid on the ground and they're able to make those big explosive plays. And I think it's going to be too much here for South Florida that has an offensive line that is struggling, majorly dealing with some injuries as well. So they are strong defensively up front. They are strong against that run, but I think the run game is going to be too strong here for Florida Atlantic. And the secondary is weak. So if the quarterback here, Cam Fencher, is able to get that ball moving down the field for Florida Atlantic, you're going to see them pick apart the secondary here of South Florida, Kasey.
That would be interesting to see. And Florida Atlantic can always be sneaky in a number of ways, but as a former UCF gal, I cannot root for any of them. So that works for me. We got more college football to get into, maybe some perspective on the NFL slate coming about, and then some change-ups in the scores for the current NHL games taking place. See if there's anything else worth gauging on the live betting lines. We talked about Ohio State and Penn State. We do have Florida Georgia Line. No, not the band, but the two teams taking on one another tomorrow. Oregon versus Michigan, Indiana versus Michigan State. So still so much to get into here on Game Time Decisions, which means you're going to want to stick with us on the other side of this break. Plus, we got to figure out what's going to go on between the Aggies and the Gamecocks. Stay with us right here on SportsGrid. Oh, actually, then we've got Duke versus Miami, and we got Ole Miss versus Arkansas. So more games for us to get to on the other side of this break.
Are you okay with him moving to the head of the class at the Heisman with those two games? Because he wasn't even in the discussion before those two games.
This is a big opportunity for Dylan if he wants to continue to make his case for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he's shown that. You know, I mean, what is he, a sixth-tier player who's going to probably end up setting most of the passing marks because he's been around for so long? So why not also throw a Heisman Trophy in the mix?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into Game Time Decisions here on SportsGrid TV, chatting with Joe Madden about all the sports taking place on this Friday night slate. We started off with hockey. We went to some college football. We're going to go back to hockey for just a minute because we've got some updates. You've got the Jets who have taken the lead 2-1 versus the Blue Jackets. Islanders and Sabres still sitting stalemate 1-1, and then Rangers hanging in there to their 1-0 lead over the Senators. Now, we talked about the Lightning versus the Minnesota Wild. Lightning looking to pick up a win on the road. Minnesota Wild just a really fun team to watch right now. But, Joe, we cannot miss out on talking about the Calgary Flames versus New Jersey Devils. Flames have a lot of excitement. They've got depth scoring, and then they've got a defenseman who I just love to watch score because he stares down the opponents in the wrong jersey. But you also have the Devils who are starting to come back to life. Nico Hischier being one of the top scorers in the league right now. So what do we like in this matchup?
This is going to be a fantastic high-octane offensive production out of both of these teams. Kasey, we got to look at a couple of storylines. Jacob Markstrom, the first time back in the Dome. As we all know, he played for my Calgary Flames for several seasons, going over to the New Jersey Devils in the offseason this year. And he's such a great pickup for the Devils, and I love what he brings to the net. But you've got to look at a couple of those Calgary players to come out and find the back of his net because they know better than anyone those weaknesses there for Jacob Markstrom. I'm looking at still the Devils to get the win here. They have the Oilers on Monday, and Calgary has the Oilers on deck on Sunday. You know that's highly circled for the Calgary Flames facing their biggest rivalry, and I do think the Devils are just a couple steps in front of this team, especially on the offensive side of things and in goal, because we'll see Dan Vladar in net. I'm actually having more trust in Dustin Wolf out there for the Calgary Flames than I am in Dan Vladar. So I do think with Dan Vladar in tonight, we could see even 5 goals out of the New Jersey Devils. Now, I'm looking at the Devils, and I'm looking at that first period over 1.5 goals. The over 1.5 goals coming in at -140. So it's juicy, Kasey, but you can look also at both teams to score in the first period. It's coming in at +156. I could see this being one style win in the first period for one of these teams. Now, Backlund is being acknowledged before this game. His last game in Utah was game 1000. They're celebrating that to start the game tonight here in Calgary. I'm taking Backlund for the anytime goal. I'd look at Rasmus Anderson for that anytime goal as well. Calgary's team total over 2.5 goals is -140. So it's juicy, but I definitely think they cash in on that. We have seen the Devils win 3 of the last 4 meetings, so I think it's theirs tonight, but I do think we're in for a fun one, Kasey.
Absolutely, in for a fun one. And Backlund has actually been pretty spectacular to watch for Calgary. Just a number of players for Calgary. So the interest is there, the excitement is there, and so is the entertainment. No changes in the scores for the current NHL games going down. And before we switched back to the NHL, we were talking some college football, Joe. And we were getting some perspective here. Before we move on from college football to the NFL, we got to see what's going on potentially in the Indiana versus Michigan State game, if there's anything that stands out to you in this matchup.
Yeah, I look at Indiana here, and I think they can do enough in this game to cover that spread of 7.5. I would take it up to double digits, Kasey. I look at Michigan State. They're coming off that game versus Michigan. That was a loss of 27-24. And I look at Indiana with their quarterback, Rook, coming out here. He missed last week because of his thumb injury, but they're optimistic that he will be back in the lineup. Unbeaten on the season, 8-0, looking to go 9-0 for the first time in school history here. I think Indiana can do it. You look at their team, number 2 scoring team offensively in the country, averaging 46.5 points per game. It's going to be hard for Michigan State here to slow them down. Indiana does have Michigan on deck, so that is one thing that is a little worrisome here with Michigan on deck, but I think Indiana in this one can get up fast and hold that lead. You can look at Indiana in the first half, might be another solid way to go, Kasey, so that you don't have that backdoor cover at the end by Michigan State, but I think this is Indiana's game to win here.
I'm right there with you. Plus, you can get more insight, especially for the in-game access, with Joe tomorrow for Endgame Live when she's rocking with Scott Wenzel. Not to mention is that I think you had a fiery week last week on Saturday, hitting a lot of things. I heard Scott giving you a lot of praise during Endgame Live, so make sure that you're hanging out with SportsGrid tomorrow for all the college football coverage. Now switching from college football, this is what I love about SportsGrid, hockey, college football. We'll check in on the NBA in a little bit, but let's go to the NFL. We got the Browns hosting the Chargers, 1.5 spread, 42.5 on the total with this one, and look, the Browns pulled off a pretty impressive play last week with Winston at the helms here. Where are you gauging this game?
Oh, this is a tough one for me, Kasey, because you know that I'm a Chargers fan and I am the most unbiased Chargers fan in the world. I love betting against my team and looking for those opportunities for them to let me down because they have done so very much. But under Harbaugh here, I really like what this team brings to the table. This is more of grind them out football. I'm looking for this matchup between these two teams to stay under the 42 points, 42 and a half actually. I think it's a lower scoring battle out there. One that the Chargers have every opportunity to win, but one that I will never be comfortable with them getting that win, even if they're up by double digits until we're in the final 30 seconds of a game, because we know the Chargers have been put in so many situations where they've got up in games and they've let them slide. So if you want to look at the Chargers to come out strong in the first half, I feel more comfortable than the full game, Kasey.
I'm right there with you. Sometimes you just have to bet against the team, but regardless, you're not biased, and I tend to be very biased sometimes. Before I let you go, Joe, make sure everybody's following Joe Madden over on X. Lions, Packers, where do you lie with this in-division rivalry?
Oh, this is going to be an absolute battle out there between these two teams, but you're giving me the Green Bay Packers with Matt LaFleur at home with plus the points, and sign me up all day, Kasey. I can't say no to this. I like what this team brings to the table, even if it's Jordan Love or Malik Willis coming out there. I do think they have all of the elements to come out and give Detroit a heck of a game. I know the Detroit Lions are coming off that huge game. Jared Goff is a little banged up though, you guys. And I do think looking at the Green Bay Packers with this defense, they're leading the league in takeaways. They're going to come out and they're going to push the Lions. I think we're going to have some scary times, some scary positions to be in. But at the end of the day, the Packers will cover with those points. I'm going to sprinkle on the money line too.
That's what makes this even more exciting. I can't wait to see what other prop lines come out for this. And then obviously get the decision on whether or not Jordan Love's going to be in the mix. But the Packers managed without him previously, and they did it very, very smart-wise. So stick with us here on SportsGrid TV. We got more on Game Time decisions on the other side of this break. Follow Joe, but stick with us here on SportsGrid.
Are you okay with him moving to the head of the class at a Heisman with those two games? Because he wasn't even in the discussion before those two games.
This is a big opportunity for Dylan if he wants to continue to make his case for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he's shown that. You know, I mean, what is he, a sixth-tier player who's going to probably end up setting most of the passing marks because he's been around for so long? So why not also throw a Heisman Trophy in the mix?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Back at it with Game Time decisions here on SportsGrid TV. One more rally, so let's get caught up on the scores already taking place in the Friday night bank. Going back to the NBA, we talked with James Young earlier. He gave you guys a lot of great indications of where you should place your money when it comes to those player prop bets, as well as teams coming out with the W tonight. So far, we said the Celtics were going to be scary because they don't want to lose right now. They're coming off of a loss going versus the Hornets, who were hoping that home court advantage were going to play favorably for them, but hey, it can't all sit there in favorability. 58-43 is where the Celtics are leading right now. Second quarter winding down, 6:49 left there. Also, he made a strong comment about the Orlando Magic not looking like the team that they did last year, and that they weren't going to find much success versus the Cavs tonight. They're behind 41-28 versus the Cavs, 7 minutes left in that second quarter. Then we saw the Knicks have a gigantic lead over the Pistons early in that first quarter. Things are shaping up a little differently, not as drastically, but still, it's all Knicks right now versus the Pistons, 59-32, 4:29 left in that second quarter. And then things freshly getting started for the Bulls versus the Nets. Bulls falling short, 15-23, as the Nets are probably in full command here. 5:03 left in the first. Another game getting underway is you got the Lakers versus the Raptors. This is mirroring exactly what we saw for the Knicks versus Pistons in the beginning of that first quarter. 23-8 was the exact number, but you've got 6:24 left in the first quarter. Kings versus the Hawks, 12-9 as the first quarter winds down there as well. So those are the live lines currently going on. You still got Pacers, Pelicans coming up, Nuggets, Timberwolves, and then Thun versus the Trailblazers. Switching back over to the NHL to see what we need to get caught up on in entirety. Coming to the end of the first period, Islanders, Sabres. Joe and I were just talking about the fact that it was not predicted to see 2 goals in that first period versus these two teams. But regardless, we'll see how the score continues to stack once they get back from that first intermission. 1-1, Horvat ties it up after Cousins opens up the scoring for the Buffalo Sabres. Another game where they're past the first period is going to be the Jets versus the Blue Jackets. This game can continue to get interesting, so we won't sit too heavily on the fact that the Jets are leading 2-1. Jets being one of the strongest teams entering the season because they were almost perfection before delivering their first loss just recently. But 2-1 over the Blue Jackets currently, and it's all Ehlers responsible for both of those goals. 3 shots on goal. Company of Miller helping him out get some of these points on the board. And then for the Blue Jackets, it's Sean Curley with the lone goal. Van Riemsdyk helping him out with the apple there. So we'll see how the Blue Jackets climb back into this matchup. But they are a strong team when it comes to their third period play. Plus, they're not big on letting too many goals get past them. So 2 goals in that first period is probably enough for them. We'll see how many more sneak through. Then Joe can breathe because the Rangers hold on to their 1-0 lead over the Senators. And it's Panarin to open up the scoring in this matchup. Lafreniere with one of the assists, 0 shots on goal, still hoping that he can find those 3 shots on goal by the end of this matchup. Senators are a team that kind of come in a bit stronger in that second period, so we'll see how things shake up there. But we've seen the Rangers have strong second periods, a lot of that correlating to their special teams play. 5-on-5 has been even better for this team so far this season, so I feel like that's going to be interesting to see how the Senators try to push the buttons of the Rangers. We know typically that comes in the form of physicality, dropping the gloves, Brady Tkachuk getting in somebody's head. But the Rangers keep their cool. They can probably manage this game and close it out with a W in front of Shesterkin. We already talked about the Panthers versus the Stars and what's gone on there. So as NHL gets ready to open up for the next couple of games coming in at the 7:58 to 8 o'clock slate, you got the Lightning versus the Wild that are getting ready to go next. Didn't get into the late slate earlier, so I'll quickly touch on it here if you guys missed anything on NHL today. But I do have the Bolts third period puck line at plus money of 156, and I have Brandon Hagel to pick up a point, minus 145. Second line has been so strong for the Tampa Bay Lightning, but it's Kaprizov that you cannot look past. I got him for a goal at plus 115. 5 goals in 6 meets, but more importantly, it's 9 points in 6 games. That's over of an average of a point per play. And this is a team that climbed right back into it on Tampa Bay Lightning's home ice. Jake Guentzel is in a groove right now, especially matching pace with Nikita Kucherov, and we saw a pretty sick setup from Nikita Kucherov for a Jake Guentzel goal versus Colorado. I think Guentzel stays in the scoring column, plus 165 for him to score tonight. 14 points in 13 games, 5 goals versus Minnesota. And if you want to take things really crazy, Mitchell Chafee at plus 600. Only faced the Minnesota Wild once, but he's been playing really well with Nick Paul and Mikey Acimont. As for game time decisions, it's coming to a close for me here on SportsGrid tonight, but we got college football tomorrow. We got coverage still continuing with in-game live and so much more, which means you want to keep all of your sports fun, lines, odds, betting, angles, and analysis here on SportsGrid TV. Make sure you're following SportsGrid over at SportsGrid. College football to May. So we got Joe, we got me, we got Scott, everybody coming in hot for the Saturday slate. So hang out with us tonight. Join us first thing tomorrow morning. But more importantly, everybody have a wonderful Friday night and continue your coverage with us here on SportsGrid.